Sam is a pastor at Hope Church Vauxhall, which was planted just over 2 years ago. And Sam's kindly come in just to tell us a little bit about his story, about what's going on there, and how God called him into ministry. So, Sam, thanks so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
We first met, I think, you were an apprentice at All Souls, and I was part of a sister church at the time. And so we've known each other for a little while. I've always appreciated, we were at college together as well, and what I love about you, Sam, is you always make time for people. God's given you some great gifts of creativity and logos and all sorts of really great things that I'm not very good at, but I love the way that you use all those gifts and skills for God and for His glory, and that's been an encouragement to me. I would love for us just to get to know you a little bit. So I probably knew you for 5 years, but if we rewind a bit further back than that, 25 years ago, a young Sam Gibb, what were you into? What was life like for you as a sort of youngster growing up?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here. So grew up mainly in like Leicestershire. So Loughborough was home. Was born in South London, so back in South London now, but moved out as a young kid to Loughborough. Football mad. Spent my time watching, playing.
Who do you support?
So I'm a Newcastle fan.
Okay.
Long story. I fell in love with Alan Shearer
in
'96, and that was it. That was game over for me. So football mad. Went to school as you do. Godly, lovely, wonderful, godly parents. One of my biggest memories, I guess, as a kid growing up was walking into my parents' bedroom in the morning and seeing them sat up in bed praying for us as kids. I've got two sisters, and they would pray regularly for us. So I guess, brought up in a Christian family, football mad. This kind of Jesus stuff, Christian stuff was there on the side, but important to my family. I guess it was a little bit further down the line at a youth camp where I came to faith, where I really met Jesus, which is massively frustrating, I'm sure, for my Sunday school teachers and youth club leaders, that you go away for a week and all the stuff that they've been teaching you doesn't seem to make a difference, and then suddenly you go to a camp and you're converted. But I'm absolutely convinced that my parents' prayer and the faithful teaching of guys at Sunday school and youth clubs and stuff made a massive difference, and the Lord was dragging me towards Himself in lots of different ways. So that was when I was around 12 or 13 that I came to faith. Still stayed football mad and still am, but now love Jesus a little bit more.
Yeah. Amazing. Oh, look, thanks for sharing that. This conference, as Richard said, is partly for helping us at whatever stage we are, thinking about how can we maximise our gospel ministry as the people we are, as the place God has put us in. We would love just to hear a little bit about what that journey was like for you. I happen to know the first time somebody put gospel ministry onto your radar was a slightly strange experience, and you laughed in their face and said, "Get lost," kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, clearly something has changed, and here you are as a church planter and pastor. Are you happy just to share what were some of the key influences and bits of advice you had as you were considering what to do with your life, and then particularly how to serve Jesus?
Yeah. So. I guess growing up as a kid and kind of becoming a Christian, and then that kind of early walk in teenage years was tough, like it is for a lot of people. Had some Christian mates, but some non-Christian mates. I think it was at university, so I ended up at university in York. I wrote lots of letters, having not got the grades that I needed, so wrote lots of letters to beg that they let me in, and hey, they let me in, which was great. And I thought that was to go on and have a job in the secular world. But actually, the Lord was doing different stuff. I arrived with an intention of playing for the uni football team and going to church and having nothing to do with anything else. Studying as well, obviously. No, not really, actually. Football and church. But I guess the Lord placed a number of guys there, some good friends who kind of collared me and challenged me on my life if I was wanting to live as a Christian, and that was important. What did that look like, and what difference did that make in my life? So I had good guys around me very, very quickly who just sort of dragged me through university and pointed me to Jesus again and again and again. And that kind of developed into stepping into positions of leadership within the kind of Christian Union, and that learned lots of lessons through that. And I guess being a guy, and there were a limited number of guys involved in the Christian Union. I think being a guy, you ended up kind of leading like lads' Bible studies and stuff like that. So I kind of ended up leading stuff. I was involved then in the camp that I'd been converted on. I was involved in sort of leading that. And again, for lack of anyone else, really, I ended up stepping into a position where I was teaching the Bible. And certainly wouldn't be the way that I'd planned it, wouldn't be the way that I'd thrust anyone into leadership, but it just ended up happening. And by God's grace, it wasn't a complete disaster. So a guy called Rico, who some of you will probably know at All Souls, his nephew and niece were at the youth camp, and he got in touch after I'd done the week of talks and said, have you thought about Christian ministry? And genuinely, I hadn't, apart from the incident that if people want to ask me about, I'm willing to talk about it, that was very random, and I did definitely laugh in the person's face who suggested I should be in ministry. So this was the first time that had kind of come up again. And I came down to London, visited, spent some time thinking about it and praying about it, chatted to my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, about the distance that we'd be. She was up in Durham and I would be down in London. And came and was convinced. I mean, Rico if you know Rico, is a very convincing person, so I was very easily convinced to come down. And then it was, when we met, I was there at All Souls. The first year was a church assistant year, which was great. It was all the kind of nitty-gritty work, all the stacking of chairs and the cleaning of toilets and all that stuff, which was a wonderful step into ministry. I think when we were chatting earlier, that probably prepared me for ministry more than anything else, more than the studies that we were doing in lots of ways, because I learned quite quickly that love and servant-hearted love is what ministry is about. And as a church planter, you're doing a lot of that stuff anyway. And I think in ministry generally, you're doing a lot of that, just the everyday, ordinary, loving, serving ministry. I guess that was the path there to All Souls. And then I was there for 3 years. I did a year as an apprentice, as some of the guys watching I know will be, a year with Trevor Pierce doing youth work, and then a year with Rico doing evangelism, and then off to Bible college.
Yeah. Now, looking back at as you said, lots of people watching this will be in a similar situation to what you were in then. Can you think of key influences or pieces of advice you had at that stage, looking into the future, wondering what the Lord had for you?
I think that so a number of things. The key one for me, I think, was having people around me who didn't think I was the best thing in the world, and were willing to tell me that, but still felt like the Lord was calling me into ministry. I think it's really easy for people who flatter you and think that you're great to say, hey, you should be going down this line, and you convince yourself that it's the right thing to do. And there was certainly an element of that, and people are nice and people want to say the right things. But it's great to have people around you who don't think that about you, but actually also think the Lord is calling you, or not. And I guess that's an important thing for the guys watching, that for some of them it might be the Lord's calling them somewhere else, and to have people who are willing to say, actually, this isn't the right thing for you, or you're not the best thing in the world, but actually this is the right thing. I think the humbling experiences as well in ministry, so realising that it's, I think you come into ministry in some ways thinking that it is all about the stage and what you're able to do up front, but actually realising that the nitty-gritty, the everyday stuff is not beautiful, is not sexy, and actually, you end up doing stuff and being in places that you wouldn't necessarily choose. But actually knowing that that's right. So, and I just, I guess, loving Jesus and loving people. So you very generously said that, I enjoy, being with people and giving time to people, and that's just because I love people, and I think.
Well, I remember at college you'd be sat in the sort of coffee area with your books open, but always a steady stream of people around chatting away. So I'm not making a comment on the studying aspect of that, but that's a wonderful thing.
No, I had a deal with, for some of you who might know Tom Heesman at Dundonald, I know he's a colleague of yours, but Tom and I had a deal where he would come down, and if he still saw me chatting when I should be working, he'd tell me to get up and go and work. And if I saw him working when he should be chatting, I'd tell him to go and start having a conversation.
That's a good friend to have. Now, we've fast forward towards the present day. You are now leading a church plant on an estate in Vauxhall. I know God has given you a real heart for that kind of ministry, and people looking in might well be thinking about church planting and urban ministry. Give us a flavour of what does that look like for you at the moment?
Yeah, so we're in Vauxhall. So like you said earlier, we planted just over 2 years ago onto a council estate in Vauxhall. It's a massively diverse area. culturally, economically, socially, massively, diverse. And so I guess there's no day that's the same. I think the closest thing that I think I went into estate ministry thinking it was city centre ministry, and thinking about cities is the main thing I need to go in with, is city mentality. But it's much more like village ministry in lots of ways. It's very local. So we lived on a neighbouring estate for the first 2 years pretty much, and then we moved, and we've just moved onto the estate itself. But even living 5 minutes away on the neighbouring estate, you're out of the estate. You don't really belong. So yeah, I think being local. So I walk around. I spend a lot of time, similar to what I was doing at college, just walking around and just chatting with people. And a lot of ministry is spent just bumping into people. And it's not a strange thing for people just to not be going anywhere, not be doing anything.
And do you wear a dog collar or?
No. This is me. No dog collar for lots of reasons. Probably legal reasons, as I'm not an ordained Anglican. I'm sure I'm not allowed. So just wandering around and just meeting people, and over time people know who you are. People talk, so people know quite quickly who you are. So I meet people who know who I am, who I've never met before because someone said something about me, whether good or bad. But yeah, lots of time just being in the community, and we've encouraged the whole church family, so those who joined us as we planted, to move in, and even over lockdown we've had a number of families who've been able to move in, a number of couples who've been able to move into the estate. So it's very local, very relational, and I think very much long term. So I think we'll be there for 10, 15, 20 years unless the Lord calls us elsewhere, because I think that's what it needs. It needs longevity. I feel like I'm building up good relationships, good reputation, but I'm still an outsider, and I probably will be for 10 or 15 years, which is very different to other areas of London where you could be there for a couple of years and everyone's there and changing every 3 years, whereas it's very much a local place. There's tough stuff. I mean, I've dealt with a whole range. It would take too long to go into the range of stuff that I've dealt with in ministry, and situations that you find yourself in where you can't do anything but laugh at the fact that this is something that I never thought ministry would include, doing this sort of job. But but it's a real joy. I love the people.
I remember when we spoke, you said, well, I know everyone's passionate about the thing they do, but I'm passionate about estates ministry. I think everyone should be doing estates ministry. You also did say that it's not sexy or glamorous. I think sometimes we maybe get the impression that actually church planting is quite cool. Young, trendy estate people, life might be cool as well. But it's like unfair question to try and pin it down. But in the couple of years that you've been there, what are some of the big lessons you think you've learned that maybe you wish you'd known when you started? Others might be considering church planting. Just in summary, a couple of big lessons that you think God's taught you.
Yeah, thank you. I think definitely, probably the biggest has been the the seriousness of the preaching and teaching of the Bible. And I know we're spending time thinking about that today, but I've been reminded again and again and again that as I stand up in front of the church family, in front of the believers in Vauxhall, in front of people who are new to faith, that as I'm opening the Bible, God is preparing his people for what is ahead of them. And it's not just me picking a book that I like, or something that I think will be interesting or engaging, or even something that I think will be building people up, because there is that as well. But actually more than that, do I actually believe that as I'm opening the Bible, as I'm teaching people, that God is necessarily preparing his church for what he's got ahead of them? And that struck me massively. So I know many people listening will know, and many people will have known Toby and Millie, who were a part of our church family. But it blew my mind to see that in the run-up to their tragic death, that we were, as a church, preparing for new creation, preparing for the reality of death. To live is Christ, to die is gain. We preached through Philippians, we were preaching through the Beatitudes and the right now realities of the not yet future. And all those things were very clearly preparing God's people for what was ahead. And that massively humbled me. It made me realise that what I do is important, but ultimately I'm a servant. I'm an under shepherd, looking after God's people, and need to take that seriously. So that would probably be the key thing.
I mean, that's amazing, and of course it's been particularly intense the time and lockdown, but what an encouragement for all of us, I suppose, as we serve the Lord and teach His word, that this is really what He's doing. He's building up His people, He's preparing us for life. Sam, thank you so much for coming in, for talking to us. I wish we could talk more, but thanks for what you're doing, and we love the work in Vauxhall, and God's been very kind, and we're grateful for you.